The video game industry is forever shifting and changing. Lately, we've seen a consistent trend in a push to have a live service game, seeing veteran single player studios like BioWare, Arcane Austin, and Rocksteady go down a path that they aren't equipped for. And yet, one constant in gaming is still the success and the value of single player games. We've had the juggernauts of the past year in Hogwarts Legacy, Baldur's Gate 3, which of course can be played co-op, and most recently, Black Myth Wukong. But even single player games are constantly evolving. The expectations that we have as consumers in terms of the quality and the length, but also for publishers in making enough money to justify how crazy expensive video games have become to produce. One of the major reveals of the Microsoft versus FTC case was how much it costs for Sony to produce its flagship single player games. Horizon Forbidden West and Last of Us Part 2 both cost over $200 million each. And I thought, it's a fascinating topic, because of course you've got your Horizons and your Last of Us, but even within Sony, you've got your Astro Bot, a 10 to 15 hour game retailing for 60. You had your Miles Morales that was a 10 to 12 hour game retailing for 50. And you even had your Uncharted Lost Legacy, which was, again, a shorter experience retailing for 40 quid. Shorter experiences with a smaller budget produced at a faster pace and retailing for less. All this thinking was brought up by a post from Tom Henderson on Twitter, who basically said, quote, "With development costs continuing to rise and AAA games now costing hundreds of millions of dollars, do you think publishers will continue to double down on the live service formula? Or do you think we'll see a change in direction in the coming years? Personally, I'd love to see more streamlined and shorter games, 15 to 20 hours, in the $30 to $40 price range." And then Paul Tassi, who I also really respect in the industry, basically quoted this tweet and said, "You are going to see more streamlined and shorter games, 15 to 20 hours, in the $70 price range." Which I think warrants a discussion on this topic, because there's a lot to dive into here. Look, this video is not me telling you how you should spend your $70 and what $70 means to you in terms of the value that you see when you're buying a video game. These are just my thoughts. Your money is your money, and how you value things is down to how you value things, in the same way that what value is to me might be different to you in terms of length, in terms of the quality of a video game, and at what price point you think justifies buying a video game. I think it's going to be a huge battle for publishers to sell the masses 70 quid games that last 15 to 20 hours. It's actually not something that I'm particularly against, because coming off the back of Astro Bot, it took me 15 hours to platinum, 60 quid, and yet for me, there wasn't a moment in that game that felt like it was time wasted. It was just pure fun and thrills, the entirety of it, and I really do mean that. But that feels like the exception now, where a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or even a game that I truly loved in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, these games feel padded out to justify their value of being 70 quid. And despite how much I adored Rebirth, I'd have loved to have shaved 10 to 20 hours off that experience for a more refined experience that just didn't really outstay anything. I think for us as consumers now, developers and publishers feel like they need to pad games out in order to justify its 70 quid price at launch. I think there's a little bit of pressure from publishers even to have a certain length of a video game in order to justify that price point and price tag to us as consumers, which for me, I think means we get less quality games overall, because by doing that, I feel like we get something that lacks replayability and is often a one and done experience, and that can be fine. But also, a great example of this is the Arkham games. I replay nearly all of them every year because they're nice, short experiences that have high quality throughout, so no leveling up to go to the next area or do these fetch quests to progress the main story. So on the whole, 70 quid single player games that last 15 to 20 hours, I'm slightly down with the idea, but the problem is, will they always maintain that quality? It's fine having Marvel Spider-Man 2 being a 22-hour platinum because of the quality of an Insomniac game. You know what you're getting, it's a great ride the entire time, but then does that push worse experiences into the 70 quid mark that probably shouldn't be? Like, how do we define what is a 70 quid 15 to 20 hour game? What justifies The Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown being 50 quid that lasts 15 hours and Metroid Prime being 70 that lasts the same? It all gets a little muddled, and I 100% understand the argument that wanting a 70 quid game to equate to a certain amount of time to play through that game. For example, let's say that Wolf Among Us 2 launched this year and it's a 10-hour experience that retailed for 70 quid. Let's say it launches around the same time as a Dragon Age: The Veilguard, something that's going to be 30, 40, 50 hours. When those two are kind of stacked together, it almost is Dragon Age: The Veilguard just seems the right choice because of the time that you're going to get for that game if you have to choose one. And that's a scenario that we're often faced with, myself included. We can't buy all the video games, so what makes you define one over the other? You're constantly looking at the bang for your buck. And that's kind of where the problem lies, in that it's all well and good making 15 to 20 hour games and charging 70 quid, but whilst there is the Elden Rings, the Dragon Ages, the Cyberpunks, these big 40 hour plus video games that are charging the same, it's an uphill battle to convince you that it's worth your money for 70 quid for 15 to 20 hours. That's why people get into a Destiny or a Warframe, because you're constantly investing in that game alone, but you're getting a large return in content and playtime. Obviously it's changing now, but an expansion and an annual pass in Destiny would equate to just a Last of Us or a Resident Evil 4 remake, and the content to price, of course that's better value for money. I also think that for consumers, it's a win-lose situation, because let's say we do get more frequent 15 to 20 hour single player video games that cost 70 quid. That's great. But then there's also competition in that if we're getting a lot more of these games, you already have to make choices now in terms of what video games you're going to pick up. But what happens then when you have 3 times as many to choose from? What equates to what is worth your money there? You know, it'd be fantastic that we're no longer waiting 7 years between Naughty Dog projects and you can expect a more frequent cadence, but it also means that as a consumer, you would have to fork out money more frequently, otherwise you're just waiting for sale. So does that harm the overall sales of these kind of games because you can't afford them? And then do these games suffer because they'll still be the 50 plus hour games, and those who equate value to time, they spend their money on those? It definitely feels like 15 to 20 hour games is risky. It's that you've really got to bring your A game to justify that value. A great example of that was Immortals of Aveum from last year. A brand new IP, flashy Unreal Engine 5 game that lasted about 12 to 15 hours. And it just bombed, and that led to the studio furloughing. I thought it was a good game, but it was just unremarkable. And the problem is that you can't just be a good video game anymore. In an era where 7 out of 10 video games, which is good, are equated as bad review scores. On the flip side of that, it's just as risky to spend 6 years on a 50-hour video game and still see the same results. I think ultimately it's come down to the issue that as consumers, we're used to equating value with the amount of time that we get from a video game. For me, I really enjoyed, and I thought it was going to be a big shift in the industry when PlayStation started doing spin-off titles like Uncharted Lost Legacy and like Spider-Man Miles Morales, shorter experiences with a lesser price tag and a lesser amount of content. These were 8 to 10 hour games retailing between 40 and 50 quid, and these just felt right, you know, in terms of the length but also the quality that you got for them. Particularly for these franchises that acted as unique adventures, or for Spider-Man, it felt like a new comic book issue, and if you could get a new Spider-Man every 3 years, you could tell some really fun and interesting stories. In the same way that Uncharted, you could tell a brand new adventure every couple of years. 40 to 50 quid with the same level of quality and production as the big games, no fluff, and it just felt right, you know. And I do think this is the sweet spot. The fact that we haven't had anything like this since Miles Morales though, kind of tells me it wasn't the financial success that they needed it to be. That maybe it was still too costly for the money that they were making back on it. There's also like how much video games have changed. For example, when Marvel Spider-Man 2 came out, everyone was like, whoa, this is well short. But video games have changed in terms of the technology. In what was once a 30-hour game, might be a 20-hour game now, because we no longer have these long loading screens. You are constantly in the action and the gameplay all the time. And that technology, it really does have an impact, not just in terms of loading screens, but also how you traverse a world and the environments and the pace that you move at. So you also have to factor that in into what a video game's length is now. The thing that I really worry about is us devaluing our media. One thing that I am absolutely sick of is free-to-play monetization. I really am. I hate it. It's really killed multiplayer games for me. Seriously. The way a multiplayer game's progression now is intrinsically tied to a battle pass just stinks. There's no cool challenges to get rewards or cosmetics. The best stuff is paid, and ultimately, there just isn't traditional progression in multiplayer games anymore. And I worry that the same can start to apply to single player. That 70 hours of junk food becomes more desirable than a condensed, high quality 15 to 20 hours because you're getting more bang for your buck in those 70. And that gets even more complex with Game Pass and Ubisoft Plus. Like, does the mass subscribing benefit single player games if they then just cancel a month later? And I think that's something that's definitely going to be tested with this year's Call of Duty. Ultimately, where I stand is I still want those Lost Legacy, Miles Morales type games at a more frequent pace. 15 to 20 hour 70 quid games, I feel like I'm okay with, but the quality really has to be there. The issue also is that you just know that you can't trust the publishers, the people at the top, to try and nickel and dime every last bit of money out of us. But I just keep coming back to it. Can these 15 to 20 hour games really thrive and sell well when there's always still going to be those 40 plus hour 70 quid games? And I just don't know if they can when so much is equated to the time that you get out of them. I think there is an overlap somewhere between quality, time and value. And there's such a lack of 50 plus hour games for me now where I finish it and I'm like, wow, what an experience throughout the entire thing. And even as I said with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a truly exceptional game, I would have loved if it had 15 to 20 hours shaved off it. I think a terrific example of this kind of game is Days Gone. A full price game that suffered tremendously with pure bloat in the middle of it that felt like it was just there to signify the game's full price tag. Compared to a video game like Astrobot, which is 60 quid and sure it's only 15 hours to platinum it. But like, this is the peak of video games. This to me is what video games should be. Not a moment is wasted and so much joy is brought to you while playing it. And I understand that 15 hours for 60 quid is not value for money for some people. But I think no matter what, these are the kind of games that we should be looking to get at a more frequent pace, because these are the games that are the best of the video game industry. And it's not about whether the price point is right for you at 60 quid at launch, or maybe the price point is right for you at 30 quid on a sale. The point is, I worry that these video games are now just going to keep getting bloated and bloated in order to justify their value. And I worry that if we don't go for this kind of model, things will just spiral. More video games will be deemed failures because it's become too expensive, leading to more layoffs, and ultimately, the video game just continue to crumble. I think it's a fascinating topic, I really do though. Like, rather than having 40 hours in a game and they're asking me to go fetch a stick or something, what's of more value? A more replayable game that's shorter and a one and done experience, or one that's less frequent with more packed in to justify the value? I don't know. Again, I just thought it was a really interesting topic. There's no right or wrong when it comes to this. And again, this is not me telling you how you should value your 70 quid, how you value your money and what makes a 70 quid game to you, just what I think about it. And that's what I do on this channel. I just talk about the stuff that I really love, or in the case of this video, find fascinating. And I do think this is a fascinating topic that warrants a lot of good, healthy discussion. So you'll have to let me know, what do you think about 15 to 20 hour games retailing for 70 quid? Do you think that's value for money? Do you like that kind of game? Or do you equate a certain amount of length, 30, 40 hours to being 70 quid, or you need a certain price point to justify length? Or is it just about the experience for you and you just care about the integral core experience and you do not mind the price point? Let me know in the comments. I'd really like to hear from you. I think it's a great discussion point, this one. Can a time exist where we do get these 15 to 20 hour games that are 70 quid that are successful alongside the 40, 50, 60 hour games for the same price? Can both coexist and to the same level of success? If you enjoyed hearing me ramble on, dropping a like would be really appreciated. And like I said, this is what I do here. I talk about the stuff that I really like when it comes to video games and that I'm passionate about, or what I find interesting. So if you're after more of that, consider subscribing. I'd love for you to stick around. Otherwise, all my socials are linked in the description down below. So if you have anything else for me, you can get at me down there. Other than that, I hope you have a terrific day. Play games, get gains, and I'll catch you next one.